Okay, so this article right here from CNBC and was presented on the network, and this thing took apparently months to put together. A reporter named Alex Sherman has something like 24 sources that I have a strong suspicion might be Disney board members themselves. He puts together this long recounting of the events of, I want to say, late 20, actually goes as far back as 2017 to the first time that Bob Chapek got a hint that he was going to be made CEO, interviewed for CEO by the board. By the time he actually got close to it, apparently they just said, by the way, it's you. And I don't know if he was suspicious or what, but when you whittle down a months long or maybe years long interview process into, by the way, Bob Iger is leaving and you are the CEO, that's the point at which you probably need to hire a lawyer and find out why you are the patsy.
It's always a good thing to know. Yeah. One of the things is kind of the general tone of this, and I covered this in the video earlier this week, so I don't necessarily want to go through every single detail from the beginning of this article again. But I want to give you guys a minute here, Pro and Jonas especially. You know, the three of us had not had a chance to talk about this until now together, at least in front of everybody else. But you got The Office here. We talked about this. It told folks a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. Iger never really left. When he left as CEO, he was still there. He was still executive chairman of the board, so he was still Bob Chapek's boss. We find out in this article, as I discussed in the video earlier this week, and this was, let's just start with this. The bathroom stuff's hilarious and stupid. Iger didn't want to leave his office. Chapek basically didn't care. The article even goes into talk about how
he wouldn't use the shower.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the greatest quote in there. The whole he's so petty. Iger is so petty that when Chapek gets the shower, Iger's like, "I told you he wouldn't use the shower."
Yeah. It's so stupid. But the thing is that they talk about how Iger is he likes to spend time on his yacht and schmoozing with Hollywood people. Chapek was the guy that was more of like a power boating guy or a kayaking guy that would go fishing. It's like two very, very different guys. But what I found interesting, and we have talked about this, I've said this for over a year, and this article went to confirm it. And I'll scroll down here in a minute and find the spot. But I want you guys to talk about this, Pro and Jonas. My favorite part of this was indeed, as we all suspected / knew, Bob Chapek, short of the 11 months that he actually had to himself, 10 months and 2 weeks that he had to himself. For the years that he was there while Bob Chapek was there as the executive chairman, or excuse me, Bob Iger was executive chairman, Bob Iger had creative control over movies and television. People were like, well, Chapek greenlit this. No, he didn't. I kept telling people, I'm like, Iger still has all the command on creative. We wondered why. People asked, like, well, how did KK get renewed in 2021? That was the first time that I really thought, okay, every bit of logic in the room, business sense, says that probably time for her to go and they find somebody else, because what she was doing with Star Wars wasn't working. Now, of course, there may have been some stipulation in the contract about Indiana Jones. She had to stay through that. Okay. I think you were the first one to break that, Pro. You were talking about that summer. Mm-hmm. But I was saying at the same time when I was doing live streams, I kind of wonder, I was like, I think maybe Iger did something at that point. Maybe it wasn't him. I still feel like Iger is very much still in control of this, even though Chapek's name is on the CEO slot.
One of the most fascinating things about that is that Iger would have been the one who greenlit Strange World, and Chapek is the one who, when Strange World is presented to him, and he literally has people on the board coming to him and saying, "Hey, we can't release this movie." Chapek is sitting there as the guy who did not greenlight it, but who is now stuck with it, who says back to the board, I don't have a choice anymore. I cannot cancel this movie lest the studios absolutely revolt against us all.
Yeah. So talk about this creative situation here. Now, go ahead and kind of take it away, because I found this was one of the most fascinating parts of this article. And then we're going to go through all the parts that I didn't go through in the video. And there's so much in here to unpack. But I thought that was one of the first things I found most fascinating in this whole thing. is
Well,
the creative aspect.
Yeah, just to just to add to that whole idea, that Safra Katz was the one that was telling Chapek, even after all of the parental rights and education stuff, that it wasn't just the non-traditional themes in the movie. It was also the fact that they were acknowledging that it was of lower quality, and also the idea that they weren't going to put marketing dollars behind it, which is just dooming it. They have this double whammy here of not marketing it and then putting it on Disney Plus as soon as possible. I don't fully comprehend why that is a strategy they continue to use. I guess it did have one successful release, which would be what's that one that they keep dreaming about putting in the parks? Encanto.
We don't talk about Bruno, Jonas, but Jonas, there's I guess there are three things that took down Chapek if you read this article. Number one, of course, is that he was always supposed to be the fall guy.
Yes.
And as he takes over, something happens that Disney did not anticipate, at least Iger did not anticipate, and that is that Chapek is phenomenally successful. We can blame it on what was happening worldwide and the rise of Disney Plus. We can come up with all kinds of things to say, what it was that prevented him from actually failing, but he was there to fall. That was his job, and he did not know it. But the other two things that caused him to go down, one I think goes in favor of Chapek, and the second one goes against. So reason number two that Chapek failed, according to this article, is that Chapek did something that he was not supposed to do other than succeeding. And that is that when he was presented with information, he did not just take it at face value for what his team was telling him, but rather he wanted to see the actual numbers. And that was a no-no. He was not supposed to do that, and it made him wiser. And then, as a result, we find out later in the article, if this is true, that he started getting actually probably false information then as a result of that.
That was,
and then number three, though, Jonas.
Suspicious.
Number three, though, Jonas, is that, and this goes against Chapek, it seems like he chose poorly, to quote from an actual good Indiana Jones film. He chose poorly when it came to knowing who his friends were. According to Alex Sherman, Chapek got rid of Jeff Morrell, who would have been his best option to navigate through this. And he actually thought that Christine Ursula McCarthy was his friend, or at least someone he could collaborate with. Meanwhile, she was stabbing him in the back the whole way. Walk us through that, Jonas. What do you think Chapek did well, and what do you think he did poorly?
Well, I think that he was, like we've all gathered from this article, he was set up to fail right from the beginning. He was, as many people said, the only one that could take this job. He was in charge of parks, and he was in charge of, which at the time was parks and consumer products, which I think now is just called parks.
Parks and experiences.
Right. And he presided over, and under his tenure, he was in charge of the products line for Frozen and for the early early Disney Star Wars success.
Which compared to today is actually better than it's better than today. How's that? Today is not good when it comes to Star Wars merch.
Right. Doesn't take much, but at the same time, there was still a lot of hope in that Force Awakens era. People were still hopeful at
there's always plenty of hope when you remake A New Hope.
Well, did you see Luke showed up at the end of the film? There's lots of possibility right there. Obviously, It wasn't until later on that we would figure out why that was a problem.
That's a story for another day.
Right. So you have somebody who has presided over one of the greatest eras of Disney parks as far as profitability for the company goes. And other than the content side of things, this is where all of Chapek's strengths are. So he is the most obvious choice, other than, say, Kevin Mayer, who seems to, I will always bring up this name. Kevin Mayer seems to be the perfect fit for CEO, but Iger in this describes him as a little brash, a little rough around the edges, which is just fascinating and ridiculous. You never know when someone with a strong personality says someone is brash, they might just be describing someone who is like them, but opposed to what they opposed to their.
When two alphas go to a bar.
Right. They both come away saying, "Hey, I don't know why other people put up with that guy. He's just like me." The other aspect, of course, is Chapek is not an off-the-cuff guy. Bob Iger's greatest strength is his ability to communicate and charm people. Chapek is obviously not that kind of person. I always like to point out his Wikipedia page. Whenever they announced that Bob Chapek was going to take over as CEO of the Walt Disney Company in late 2019, there wasn't even a Wikipedia page. There was a carve out for the Bob Chapek talk page, which would maybe become a Wikipedia page, and it said Bob Chapek has been named as the successor to Bob Iger as the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. So this is a guy who had no profile outside of the company, and the only people who knew who he was were pixie dusters who had a problem with the fact that he started charging for parking at the resorts. He came up with all these nickel and dime reasons to increase revenues from the parks. He would be the one who championed the reservation system at the parks. All of those things that were really kind of bugging customers during this high profitability period for the parks came from Chapek. So he's got a history of doing well within the company, just not doing well running the content side. And arguably, of course, with Iger running the content side, we have never seen such a rapid decline in the Walt Disney Company than we have with Bob Iger being left to his own devices running the content side.
Renegade.